Story 1. The hearth and the horror. The snow fell with devotional silence, smoothing the harsh edges of the world. Inside the Everglen Lodge, everything was golden, red, and safe. A perfect, curated portrait of Christmas Eve bliss. Clara traced the rim of her warm cider mug, watching the flurries blur the large, mullioned window. Outside, the world was quickly becoming monochromatic white and unforgiving. Inside, the crackling hearth threw a dancing light across the high, vaulted ceiling, warming the air thick with the scent of pine, cinnamon, and burnt sugar. There were 8 of them gathered for the annual cabin isolation trip. 4 couples, all friends since university, now professional, comfortable, and perhaps slightly too familiar with one another's neuroses. Tonight, however, the familiar tensions were buried beneath forced festive cheer. Another shot of Brandy, Clara Bear. Leo, Clara's husband, was leaning back in a worn leather armchair, his face flushed and cheerful. He was the anchor of the group, perpetually optimistic, and currently oblivious to the dull thrum of anxiety that had been vibrating in Clara's chest since they arrived. "No, thanks, honey. I'm good. Don't be such a Scrooge," teased Chloe, leaning over the plush velvet sofa, already halfway through her 4th glass of wine. Chloe's husband, Marcus, merely grunted, engrossed in a financial magazine despite the holiday. He'd brought his work, as always. The third couple, Maya and David, were huddled affectionately on the rug by the fire, exchanging soft, private laughter. They were the sickeningly happy ones, the couple everyone secretly hoped would fight just to break the relentless glow of their perfection. The 4th person, the outsider, perhaps, was Julian. He was David's younger cousin, quiet and intense, who had been invited last minute after the original 8th guest cancelled. Julian sat apart, near the bookshelf, ostensibly reading but with eyes that darted constantly, assessing the room and its occupants with an unnerving detachment. "It's a white Christmas miracle, though, isn't it?" David said, gesturing toward the window where the wind was now beginning to howl. The weather forecast said light flurries. "This is a full-blown blizzard." "Don't jinx it, Dave," Maya murmured, pulling her thick wool sweater tighter. "I like being snowed in. It means we don't have to worry about driving the awful mountain roads tomorrow." Leo chuckled. "Exactly. Forced togetherness. It's what Christmas is all about." Clara forced a smile, but her anxiety intensified. It wasn't the isolation she minded. It was the sudden, oppressive weight of the storm. The Everglen Lodge was perched on a ridge 2 hours from the nearest plowed road, relying solely on its backup generator in a true emergency. And this felt like a true emergency. She stood and walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The light from the great room cast a weak, futile circle into the swirling darkness. The wind hit the lodge with a sound like a physical blow, a deep, resounding thump that rattled the antique window panes. "It's getting really bad out there," she said, her voice sounding thin against the building noise of the storm. "It's fine, Clara," Marcus said without looking up from his magazine. "This place is built like a bunker. Relax." As if on cue, the world outside gave a tremendous, blinding flash, a crack of static electricity that momentarily turned the entire landscape blue-white. A second later, the lodge plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. A collective gasp went up, followed by immediate, nervous chatter. "Leo! The generator!" Chloe cried out, her voice tight with sudden panic. I know, Leo said, fumbling for his phone. "The breaker box is in the pantry off the kitchen. Give me a minute." The mood instantly shattered. The soft, cozy glow of Christmas was replaced by an aggressive, black void. The warmth of the fire, while still present, felt small and increasingly inadequate. Julian was the only one who seemed unbothered. Clara watched his dark silhouette rise from the bookshelf without hesitation. "I'll grab the emergency lantern," Julian said calmly. "I saw a couple by the woodpile." In the agonizingly long 5 minutes that followed, the only sounds were Leo's muttered curses as he stumbled through the kitchen, the wind's relentless roar, and the nervous shuffling of the others. Then, Julian returned. A large, oil-fed lantern, meant for ice fishing, cast a bright, yellow beam that sliced through the darkness. The shadows it created were long, distorted, and monstrous. Leo emerged a minute later, wiping a smudge of grease from his cheek. "The main line is down," Leo announced, sounding worried now. "I reset the breaker, but the generator didn't kick on. Something external must have ripped out the service line. It's not just a power cut. We're completely off the grid." The realization settled heavily. No lights, no heat beyond the dwindling fire, no television, and crucially, no Wi-Fi or phone signal in this remote location even before the storm. They were truly alone. Okay, David said, trying to inject some optimism. "We have plenty of wood, right? We're fine. It's an adventure. We'll conserve," Leo agreed, moving Julian's lantern to the center of the mantelpiece. "Everyone, grab an extra blanket. Let's keep the fire stoked and stick together." They spent the next hour wrapped in blankets, huddled around the fire, their conversation reduced to grim whispers punctuated by the blizzard's fury. The battery on Chloe's phone died. Marcus was pacing. Clara felt the air growing colder, heavier. Around 1 a.m., the fire began to truly diminish. "I'll get the last of the logs from the porch stack," Leo volunteered, standing up. "We need to save the main store for later." "Take Julian's lantern," Clara insisted, pushing it towards him. "Don't go out in that pitch black." Leo took the lantern, his face visible for a moment in the light, tired, strained, but still determined. Back in a flash, the silence he left behind was profound. Only the deep groan of the lodge and the roar of the wind remained. 3 minutes passed. 5 minutes. 10. "He's taking forever," Chloe whined. "The snow must be drifted against the porch door," Marcus suggested, annoyed. Clara felt a freezing spear of fear pierce her chest. "No. The porch is covered. The logs are right there." She stood up abruptly. "I'm going to check on him." "Clara. Wait." David started, but she was already moving. Julian spoke up, his voice startlingly close in the dark. "I'll go. You stay by the fire." Clara shook her head, fueled by a terrifying premonition. "No. He's my husband. Stay here." She grabbed Leo's heavy woolen scarf from the coat rack and wrapped it around her neck. Julian handed her a thick, iron fireplace poker. It felt cold and reassuringly heavy in her hand. "Be careful," he instructed quietly. Clara crept through the pitch-black kitchen, guided only by the faint light filtering from the great room fire behind her. The cold hit her immediately, not just the outside air, but a deep, bone-chilling cold that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. She reached the back door, fumbling with the deadbolt. It clicked open, and she pulled the heavy oak door inward, revealing a small, enclosed porch meant for storing boots and wood. The porch was open to the elements on one side, covered only by a trellis that was now choked with snow. The scene before her was wrong. Leo wasn't there. But the lantern was. It sat upright on the snowy floor, still burning brightly, casting its beam straight up into the swirling snow. It illuminated nothing but the white, frantic dance of the storm and the dark, wet outline of wood on the floor. But the most disturbing detail was not the absence of Leo, but the presence of something else. Right beside the lantern, half buried in a fresh drift of snow, was a thick, crimson splash. It looked impossibly dark against the brilliant white, spreading outward in viscous lines like some gruesome, abstract painting. Clara moved closer, her boots crunching on the frozen wood. The metallic smell, sharp and coppery, overwhelmed the scent of pine. Then she saw the scarf. It was Leo's woolen scarf, the one she had just seen him take. It was looped tightly around a broken piece of wood from the kindling pile, torn away as if ripped off in a violent struggle. But the scarf wasn't the problem. Affixed to the scarf, held fast by a frozen, terrifying grip, was a hand. It was severed just above the wrist. The skin was pale blue and dusted with snow, and the fingers were curled in a final, agonizing clutch around the woolen fabric. A gold wedding band gleamed dully on the fourth finger. Clara didn't scream. The sound caught in her throat, a dense knot of ice and disbelief. She didn't drop the iron poker. She didn't faint. Her mind, in that split second, became a machine of pure, cold terror. This was not an accident. This was not the storm. Someone was out there. And Leo was gone. A sound, a muffled, scraping thud, came from the darkness just beyond the porch railing. It was the sound of heavy boots dragging something across the deep, wet snow. Clara backed away slowly, meticulously, terrified that the crunch of her own footsteps would betray her. She did not take her eyes off the hand, the red, the snow. She slammed the heavy oak door shut, the noise deafening in the silence of the lodge. She fumbled with the deadbolt, shaking so badly it took 3 tries, until the brass bolt slid home with a solid, definitive click. She leaned against the door, the cold of the wood seeping through her thick sweater, and finally let out the strangled, silent cry that had been trapped inside her. The iron poker dropped from her numb hand and clattered onto the tiled kitchen floor. Clara, what is it? What happened? It was Julian's voice, now right beside her. She turned, grabbing his arm, her eyes wide and staring into the darkness. The hand, she whispered, the words catching in her throat, tasting of iron and fear. It's Leo's hand. Someone took him. Julian's face, illuminated briefly by the distant firelight, remained strangely composed. His eyes narrowed, and he didn't question her. The logs, he stated, his voice low and utterly devoid of emotion. He wasn't collecting logs. Clara shook her head, unable to speak further. David and Marcus appeared then, their shadows looming large in the narrow hall. What the hell is going on? Marcus demanded. Where's Leo? Clara simply pointed, numbly, back toward the deadbolted door and the porch beyond. He's not coming back, she managed, her voice cracking. There's blood. And it was like he was pulled out. Just as Marcus and David turned toward the door, a low, wet thump struck the back wall of the lodge, right behind the door. It was followed by a slow, dragging sound, like something heavy being moved. A faint, chilling scraping began at the corner of the house, moving toward the front. They were trapped. And the thing that had taken Leo was still close. Too close. Story 2. 0 Hour Static. The Deep Space Research Station Aether was, to Dr. Elara Vance, less a vessel and more a prolonged exercise in silent claustrophobia. It wasn't the small size, it was the isolation. Circling the temporal anomaly known only as the Chronos Scar, Aether was 2 billion kilometers from the nearest signal, perpetually shrouded in an oppressive, starless black. Elara adjusted the thin, magnetic cuff on her wrist. The cuff was a custom chrono stabilizer, a mandatory piece of kit intended to ward off the low-level temporal drift that permeated the Scar's gravitational pull. It usually offered a gentle, rhythmic hum. Tonight, it felt like a cold, useless weight. She stood in the observation hub, the station's largest dome, staring out at the Scar. It wasn't the fiery, swirling vortex of fiction. It was quiet, massive, and purple-black, a non-light that drank in all surrounding energy and time, radiating a pervasive, unsettling stillness. Status report. Commander Trellin, Elara said, her voice echoing unnaturally in the reinforced chamber. Commander Trellin, a man whose face was a roadmap of previous deep space assignments, didn't turn from his console. Stabilization is nominal, Doctor. The containment sphere is holding its shape around the core experiment, Project Chronos. We are maintaining a 0.0003% deviation from predicted temporal distortion metrics. Too close, Elara muttered. She knew Trellin hated her paranoia, but he wasn't the one who had written the original theoretical framework for the Scar. She had. And every calculation led back to the same warning. Stability was an illusion waiting for the right trigger to shatter. It's the most stable we've been all month, Trellin countered, a faint sigh bleeding through the comms. We are entering the final 7 minutes before the Phase C activation sequence. Engineer Kale is at the secondary power core. Dr. Aris is securing the primary field harmonics. 4 minutes to go. The crew was small, specialized, and currently distributed across the 3 major sections of the station. Trellin overseeing the systems, Aris managing the exotic matter stabilizers, Kale monitoring the power, and Elara, the only temporal physicist, watching the clock and feeling the ice form in her veins. Remind Aris to lock the auxiliary failsafe at T-60, Elara instructed, moving towards the main console. The pressure wave from the initial phase shift is brutal on structural integrity. Aris is a perfectionist, Doctor. He knows the drill. A loud, clear chime filled the hub. 3 minutes to PHASEC. Elara's gaze was fixed on the containment sphere display. Project Chronos was designed to capture a fraction of the Chronos Scar's energy, not for power, but for pure observation. It was about seeing what lay on the other side of time's barrier. The experiment involved creating a micro-bubble of stasis, a temporary zero point where temporal laws ceased to exist. Commander, Elara said, her voice now tight. I'm getting feedback on the sensor array. A spike in nonlinear energy discharge. It's outside predicted tolerances. Preemptively abort the sequence. Trellin paused. Doctor, we are 87 days into this mission. We abort now. We lose everything we've gained. The spike is within safety margins, barely. There are no safety margins with the Scar. Abort. Trellin. That spike isn't energy, it's a temporal echo. It means the future is pushing back. T-90 seconds, the automated voice announced, crisp and cold. Trellin slammed his hand onto his console. No, Doctor. We follow protocol. Stand by for activation. Elara didn't argue. She knew Trellin would override any command if she didn't use his authority. Instead, she bolted toward the main sequence panel, intending to physically initiate the shutdown. She was 10 feet from the panel when the station violently bucked. It wasn't the slow, heavy vibration of a gravitational fluctuation. It was a sharp, electric snap, like a billion-volt breaker shattering. The lights, which had been a steady, professional blue-white, turned a frantic, strobing red. Alarms blared. Not the automated warning siren, but a high-pitched, human shriek of metallic stress. We're losing containment, Trellin yelled. His voice was raw, his composure finally broken. The Chronos Scar, visible through the observation hub's reinforced viewport, seemed to ripple. The purple-black void momentarily flashed blinding white, a silent, furious scream of energy. The power failed completely. The ether plunged into an inertial, silent darkness. The only sound was the dying hiss of the venting atmosphere and the low, terrified gasp from Commander Trellin. Elara threw herself against a bulkhead, her head ringing. The air was suddenly freezing. She could taste ozone and something metallic, like burnt copper. A few terrifying seconds later, the emergency auxiliary power sputtered to life. The ether didn't return to the blue-white serenity. Instead, a sickly, Intermittent orange glow pulsed from the backup lights. Trellin. Elara gasped, pushing herself up. Report. Trellin's console was smoking slightly. Structural integrity compromised in sections 3 and 4. Secondary power core is offline. Containment. Containment is gone, Doctor. The Chronos field collapsed. Elara stared at the viewport. The scar was back to its ominous, silent blackness. The collapse meant the micro-bubble of zero time was gone, violently dissipated into the void. Casualties? She asked, already knowing the answer. Checking crew manifests now. Aris. Kale, report. Respond immediately. Trellin's voice was hoarse. Silence. Just the low, mechanical wheeze of the emergency life support. Trellin frantically tapped his console. Aris is offline. Kale is offline. He swallowed hard, his eyes wide and hollow in the orange light. Life signs from Kale's sector, none. But Aris, what about Aris? His locator beacon is active, Doctor. It says he's still in the primary stabilization chamber. His vitals are stable, but he isn't responding to comms. It's impossible. That chamber should be sealed tight. Elara felt the cold dread twist into something sharper, confusion. If the containment field collapsed, the chamber would have been sterilized. She ran out of the observation hub, heading for the primary stabilizer chamber, the magnetic grip of her stabilizer cuff feeling like a vice. The corridor was a mess. Bulkheads were warped, ceiling panels lay scattered like fallen dominoes. But when she reached the stabilization chamber, Section B, the heart of the experiment, the main pressure door was sealed. Aris. Elara yelled, banging on the heavy metal. Can you hear me? Nothing. She input her security code, overriding the lock. The door hissed, struggling against the pressure, and slid open with a wrenching screech. The chamber was bathed in a dull, ambient green from residual exotic matter. The air smelled wrong. Not of ozone, but of rust and ozone, a cloying mix that made her dizzy. Dr. Aris was there. He was sitting in his command chair, fully suited, his helmet visor down, strapped in as if he had just been waiting for the all-clear. His hands were resting on the arms of the chair. He was fine. Too fine. Elara rushed over, reaching for the helmet release. Aris, thank God. Are you hurt? What happened? As she reached him, her boot nudged something on the floor. It was a small, cylindrical device, a backup data stick. She picked it up. It was hot, vibrating faintly, and seemed to hum with the same aggressive static she had felt from the scar. Then she looked at Aris's visor. She could see her own terrified reflection, but not his face. He wasn't breathing. She touched his shoulder. His suit felt strangely stiff, unnaturally rigid. She tried to unlatch his helmet. It wouldn't budge. Aris, why are you strapped in? The emergency was 30 seconds ago. Talk to me. Something about the posture, the precise way his fingers rested on the chair's armrests, was wrong. His knuckles weren't white with tension. They were oddly smooth. She leaned closer to the visor, peering through the slight condensation. Inside the helmet, Dr. Aris was a perfectly preserved, petrified statue. His skin was the color of old marble, his eyes wide and blank, frozen in the millisecond before the field collapsed. His entire body, suit and all, had been flash frozen into a crystalline, temporal statue. He was physically present, yet utterly outside of time. Elara recoiled, stumbling back. Trellin. She yelled into her comms. Aris he's in stasis. Zero time capture. It's a temporal snapshot. He's gone, Trellin, but he's here. What? That's impossible. The field collapsed. Elara stared down at the data stick she was holding. It was still vibrating. She turned it over, and etched deeply into the smooth, metallic surface, in writing that was neither laser etched nor engraved, but simply there, was a single, cryptic phrase. It looked like it had been scraped into the metal with enormous force, then immediately healed over and polished smooth by the temporal energy. I am still here. Elara's breath hitched. That wasn't Aris's handwriting. It wasn't Kale's. And it definitely wasn't Trellan's. It was her own. A version of her own handwriting, matured by decades and rendered in a script she hadn't learned yet. She realized the chilling truth of the Chronos Scar. The experiment didn't just fail to capture a moment of time. It had ripped their current reality, tearing a seam between the now and the then. Trellan, Elara whispered, clutching the data stick. We're not alone. The collapse didn't just kill the power. I think it spliced the timeline. The orange emergency light in the chamber flickered again, and in the sudden, blinding flash of white, Elara saw a reflection. Not of herself, but of an older woman, standing in the doorway, wearing a stained, tattered version of her own lab coat, holding a weapon made of impossibly smooth black glass. The light returned to orange. The woman was gone. But on the floor, where the older woman had stood, was a single drop of dried, black blood. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment and turn on notifications if you enjoyed the video so you never miss an upload.